overall great conference. And I've been watching some talks on and off, but been really busy with the panel and the talk. But yeah, here we are. And this panel is going to be about React Native. And we have got like great folks from different parts of the world. And let me invite them over here. Okay, so we've got Aman and Satya. There you go. And Evan. Okay, so before we start, let me introduce myself. I'm Sanket, and I'm a software developer. I have this love for React Native. I've been doing React Native for a really long time, I think almost 4 years now. And yeah, we've got Aman on board with us. Aman loves Expo, and he's been helping DraftBit for the tech content part. And then we have Evan. You might know him from Expo and his wild experiments that he keeps posting on Twitter, and his love for Lego. Great. And we have Satya. Satya is known for a bunch of projects in React Native, uh, mainly known for his contribution on React navigation. He's currently working with folks at Callstack in Poland. So a round of applause for all of you there. Great. So to kick this off, all right, I'm going to throw some questions, but yeah, there is a lot happening in React Native lately, and there are like new architecture that is coming in. Then we have like different tools that's there, but I also want to keep it fun and really open, not really make it like super formal with like specific topics and then talk only about that. So open to you all guys. Aman, Satya, Evan. Hey.
Hey, what's up?
Great.
Hi.
Okay,
Hello.
so all right. So Aman, you are right now in.
So I'm working as a contract developer, and I'm also working as a tech writer at DraftBit.
And you are right now in Delhi, located in Delhi.
Yeah, I'm located in Delhi.
Okay, great. And Satya, you're joining from?
I'm right now in Wrocław in Poland. It's morning and snowing here, but yeah.
And how about you, Evan?
I'm from, or I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California. It's 1:18 a.m. right now. It's a fun hour. It's
Really?
my second favorite hour to talk about React Native at.
Right. I think this is the most diverse panel that we have right now in this conference. Like people joining from different time zones and not even close by. I think Satya, it's 7 or something in the morning for him. Me and Aman, we are in the same time zone. But yeah, let's get started. Like, what's up in React Native, and like let's start with say debugging. What are your thoughts on debugging with React Native? Like we have options like the log box, we have React Dev Tools, and then Flipper. That's the new hot thing in React Native, right? So I'm going to like move around, and maybe we can do it from Aman, then Satya and Evan for this one. So let's go ahead with Aman. Yeah.
Sure. So I haven't used Flipper a lot, and I don't have as much opinion on Flipper. But the logbox, yeah, I really love the new interface since it got released last year. And but there are things like stack traces and all that stuff that doesn't get uh, accumulated a lot with logbox because sometimes you don't know where the bug is coming from. I think Evan is working with the new cool stuff on Expo. Like you can see actually where the things are coming from in your command line terminal.
Interesting
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I could jump in with that. So what we found is essentially like the stack traces come from the bundler level essentially, and like the dev server. And with React Native, we use the Metro bundler, which used to be kind of part of React Native, and then it was split out later. Whereas in a lot of web tooling, you see people use Webpack, and more recently like ES Build. And so we've identified a lot of areas in Metro where we could like improve stack traces. So for instance, in a bundler, usually when you do like a require or an import, it will switch that require out for a different function, like a special function. And then it will usually include that function in the stack trace, but that's not very relevant to your stack trace. You don't want to see like, app.js and then some like Metro require and then like whatever file you required. So you can like actually go through and filter all of those out. So you kind of collapse things like that. Another example is like in Babel, usually you'll see like regenerator runtime and all these other like helper functions get added to your stack trace. And these things just kind of like end up bloating your stack trace. We have like 20 stacks and it's only like some error thrown in the top level of your first file. So in like SDK 41 of Expo, which comes out in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be rolling out all of these like stack trace improvements and stuff like that.
I have a question. Is it only going to be for Expo, or is it going to be for React Native in future?
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you think about how like Next.js, Gatsby, Storybook, Create React App, they kind of have a very like a Webpack config which they provide, and then like the same bundler will then ingest that config and then use that for the bundling. So this is a package which is called like Expo/Metro config, which is like the one that we use, but is very like similar to the same one that we use in the React Native CLI, the community CLI. So what we did was we like split out the interface so that you can change whichever config you want. And yeah, you can just use it in any kind of project that you want. Same with like if you were to use like the Storybook version of Webpack config instead of like the Create React App version of Webpack config. So we're just kind of making the tools like a little bit more agnostic, similar to like the ecosystems you see in like the React DOM, React.js type world. And it's a lot of really interesting things are coming out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll definitely be using that config because stack traces suck right now.
Yeah, something I don't like about it, like that you see with Create React App, is that where like every stack trace has a preview of the code underneath it, whereas in Logbox it only shows a preview for the last stack trace you have. So if the last stack trace wasn't relevant, then you don't actually get like a preview of potentially the second to last one, which is where the relevant code was. I think that happens in like the actual like Metro library where symbolication is sent back. So I might look at improving that next, where you can just see like a preview for every stack, and then it won't really matter as much if the most recent one was relevant or not.
Yeah, I would like to thank you on behalf of all React Native users, because this is life changing.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm pretty excited for it.
It's interesting to see how Expo come up with something and then later it goes back to React Native and becomes a norm in the long run. So great work from the Expo team. Satya, let's get back to the topic. So you mentioned about Flipper at one time. So are you using Flipper at all?
I mean, I have been using it, not a lot, but still. What's cool about Flipper is you can create your own plugins. It's probably not relevant for most people, but I was thinking of creating a plugin for React navigation where you can see your navigation tree, you can change your config and stuff like that. And because you can create custom plugins with custom UI, it's pretty cool because every like tool can have their own UI, and you can have like you can have like anything you want in the DevTools, which is pretty cool. Also, of course, you can debug your existing React Native app with there is React Native DevTools built in. Sorry, React DevTools built in, so you can see your component tree. Then, if you are using Hermes, you can even debug your app in Flipper, which is pretty cool. One problem I had, like, you cannot really profile in Flipper right now. Whenever I try profiling, it's just like stops. It doesn't do anything. So that's a pain point, because I was really excited to debug profile my app in her like in the device instead of Chrome debugger, because that would be a big improvement, because you are not running your code on Chrome on your Mac OS, you are running it on your phone, right? Yeah,
Right.
so I'm really excited for Flipper. I'm hoping that these things will be fixed in future, and then it will be an awesome experience. Also, I heard that they are going to change the default JavaScript execution environment to Hermes in future for both Android and iOS. And if it happens for iOS, then we have a consistent debugging experience on both Android and iOS. And yeah, I think that's gonna be good.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. So when you say like the debugging, I guess could you explain for maybe the people listening like what you mean by remote JS debugging? You're talking about like the
Yeah,
JS running in Chrome, right?
yeah. Well, so the thing is, right now, when you debug your React Native app, you click debug, and it opens Google Chrome on your laptop, right, or a desktop. So what happens is all of your code runs in Google Chrome on your laptop or your desktop, and it communicates with the native code via WebSockets. So it's not really running on your mobile, it's running on your laptop. So there is a difference in the environment, because Google Chrome is a completely different environment from your phone, which runs JavaScript core. So things are not quite the same. There will be some features working on your laptop, not working on your mobile. There will be performance differences. uh, yeah, so it's not ideal to like profile the app or like debug everything. For example, you cannot use Intel on your phone, because Hermes doesn't include it, but it works on desktop. So you'll write a feature and see it is working on Chrome, then you try it on a mobile and it doesn't work. So yeah, that's what I meant by debugging on desktop.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's like it's impressive and crazy that that actually works.
Yeah, that's definitely crazy. Also, one more thing is, in future they're introducing turbo modules, which is synchronous access to the like native APIs. And because it's synchronous, it's not gonna work with WebSocket anymore like it does right now. So you can see it when you use reanimated, which uses these new APIs. You cannot use Chrome debugger with that anymore. So you have to use Hermes debugger on Flipper. So I think like that's the direction they're going. Chrome debugger is gonna go away soon, and it's going to be Flipper by default.
Interesting. It's good to see like where it all started. Flipper is a native tool, and then they added JavaScript on top of it. And looks like Michelle is working on that at Facebook, the Mobux creator. So I see good stuff coming from him. Anyway, I think we have already moved on to the second topic about the JSI turbo modules and Hermes. Do we call it Hermes or Herms? What is it?
I
I
think
call it
I think
Hermes.
it's Hermes when you say it,
It's
and
Hermes. Okay, okay,
yeah.
great, great. And so like with this new architecture, we are going to get rid of a lot of complexity like bridge, and we are going to, I hope we are going to improve the performance as well, right? So let's talk about this new architecture a little bit, and see, and also talk about the ecosystem around it, like be it reanimated or be it. I think we have already touched upon the debugging mechanism, right? Uh, yeah, over to maybe Aman.
Sure. So, like the way currently animation works is like the biggest problem with the animation that I feel is that because of the bridge and like if you're using React Native animated API for micro interactions, that's fine, but you would turn into some performance issues if you're using for more than that. Uh, like I'm not an expert on turbo modules because I have not seen how it's working right now. So I'll just hand over to Satya.
Okay. So Satya, the architecture, do you think it's going to be more like the architecture of Flutter, wherein we have like interruptible animations?
I mean, we do have interruptible animations right now, but the thing is, it's not synchronous, which means that you don't know immediately after you interrupt it. It's going to pass over the bridge, which is asynchronous, and like it's gonna introduce a delay. So the main issue with animation right now is if you need to run some code in JavaScript, you have to go through the bridge, which introduces a delay. And with turbo modules and reanimator, it's not going to be a problem anymore. I mean, there was of course reanimator one, which was like implemented without turbo modules. But the problem with reanimated one, it has a like custom DSL, so you had to write all of the logic in a completely different language. I mean, it's still JavaScript, but you are still writing different functions to do the same thing. Like there is a if of like
Yeah, it was
condition
very
function.
complicated. It
Yeah,
was
it's
super
like
complicated.
it's so crazy. It's crazy how they managed to do that. It's also crazy how it works.
Yeah,
But
but
it's
reanimated too. It's
yeah.
like
And when you get to reanimated too, it's like thank God, it's like a completely different experience, and it's so cool because you have these functions called worklets, and these worklets are like small functions, and you write it in your code like any other code, and they take it and they run it in a completely different like on the UI thread, not in your JavaScript thread. So it's pretty cool because it's pretty seamless how it works. And yeah, I also saw someone on Twitter write another tool based on this concept, and you can use that tool to run any code on a separate thread, which is
oh, I
also
saw that too. That's really smart. I'm
yeah,
excited
that's
for
really
that.
smart. So
For
yeah,
listeners, it's like Reanimated has like a worklet system which lets you just like parallelize code similar to like web workers and JavaScript. And so this exposes that API and then it lets you like wrap a function and then that function sends it over. So if you had some expensive like task that you needed to run, like I think his example was Fibonacci numbers or something, which is
yep,
really like a comprehensive. It runs it instantly. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's
Interesting. So
really
I
cool.
think the approach that is changed is more of like it was 100% declarative, and it had to be sent over the bridge with serialization, and that was the problem. And now getting a direct access to the runtime and making it interruptible, a bit like Flutter, makes it really fast. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, no, yeah. Yeah, I think it uses like Babel for transforming. So you add like this directive, like it's called worklet as a string in front of your function or inside your function, and then it transforms that. So it really utilizes some of the like more interesting parts of the JavaScript and React ecosystem, like the modern JavaScript ecosystem, where transpiling is so like commonplace. Where I think I remember seeing the early applet API, which was a little like less intuitive, but now it's all like transformed, and you just add a Babel plugin to get it all working. It's pretty impressive.
yeah,
But the team and things like Modi, which have been built on top of it, are also really nice. Modi is like a library which kind of gives you things like Magic Move, where you can specify like the enter animation and then the exit animation, and it's all like it's very simple. You just kind of declare the styles that you want to see happen. And so for people who aren't necessarily fully into animations, it's very simple now to just add like 60 frame per second enter animations and exit animations and make your app really move.
yeah.
Interesting. Good stuff. I think we are going a bit too in depth with like advanced topics. So so please don't judge me if I use
Oops.
console log, if we use console log for debugging, and maybe just animated.view for animation.
Oh yeah. No, we all do the same thing too,
Yeah,
actually. Console
yeah.
log is still the
All
bomb.
the time.
Console log 11111. I'm here.
Like, yo, 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 yo.
Great. All right. I think a lot of great things in like coming here in React Native animation, turbo modules, JSI, and whatnot. Let's move on to something uh, on the simpler side. Like, what does it mean? Like, React Native is ultimately a way to build user interface, right? So let's talk about what's happening over there. Like, we have design systems, we have uh, like platform specific components and the need for that. So the question that I want to ask all three of you is like, what's the current state of design systems in React Native, and do we come across uh, like situations when we have to do like platform specific design and follow the guidelines of like different OSs? Yeah, over to maybe Satya.
Yeah, I mean, we come across this problem all the time. For example, right now when I'm working in React navigation, we have like different UI on Android and iOS for the header, for example. So what we want is like we want like as much code sharing as possible, but we also want like platform specific user experience, right? You don't want to like provide a generic experience to every user, because then it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be great. Yeah, so it's really easy how to do it in React Native, because you don't have to do much. What you have to do is you can either use like .ios.ts extension or .android.tsx or JS extension to write platform specific code, or you can use platform.os, and you can check what the current platform is. You can also use platform select. So there are all these APIs, and so it makes it really easy to write platform specific code. And I have found that you don't actually have to write it a lot, because when you think about it, even on Android and iOS, like UI is almost the same. Like you usually have a list of things and they look kind of like very similar. There are very few differences, like buttons look a bit different, the header looks a bit different, but they're like actually like very smaller parts of the app. They are not the majority, so you don't have to write a lot of this platform specific code. And for example, I was maintaining React Native paper, and it's also a component library based on material design, and we support both Android and iOS. But of course we cannot take material design as is and put it on iOS, because it doesn't fit the platform guidelines of the iOS platform. Yeah, so we also have to do some platform checking there, but it's also very minimal.
Interesting. So Satya, your point of view, I think, is more from a library creator, and you have like done that. I think Aman has a lot of experience on building it for the masses, right? So Aman, like, what's your experience like in this area?
So yeah, there are like, as they mentioned, like React Native paper. The thing with that is that you cannot put material design on iOS. There are libraries like when I started using React Native Elements, which is more of a general purpose component based library. You don't get that look and feel of each platform. So ultimately, you're going to write your own components and you're going to write your own styles instead of depending on completely on a UI library. So one way I find to tackle this problem is to use something like Restyle from Shopify, where you can arrange your typography, arrange your components, custom UI components, quite in a quite easy manner. I feel it's easy because the theme is exposed to the whole React Native application, and just like concentrate on what design elements you are using in your app design and go for it. Like, just like you have to go for your custom elements. So there are things for platform specific, like you might be not having that same look and feel on Android, but for most applications, things are going to be same.
You know what's my dream? My dream is there should be a library. You use the same component on both platforms without writing any platform specific code, and it takes a UI and like renders it correctly on Android or iOS. It will be like awesome.
Are you talking about native base?
Yeah, I think that's where he's going with that. Yeah, native base is the one.
Yeah.
I find that like when I do platform specific styles, React Native is actually pretty good at handling and just like libraries in this universal React ecosystem are really good at handling like looking good across platforms. And when I end up using the platform extension like .web or .android, that usually comes afterwards. Like I have my app and it works really well, but then I want like a button to look specific on web. So like it's not like while I'm going, it's like, ooh, the only way I can make this work is by adding platform specific code. Usually it just works. And then later it's like, I want to improve it or make it feel more like unique to that platform. So then I add the platform specific stuff. And then it ends up, being pretty nice. Things like that are like accessibility roles, where maybe accessibility is a lot more like enhanced on web than it is on like iOS. And then I want to like add more accessibility. So I do that in like a .web file, or I wrap that in like the platform module, things like that, I guess.
Makes sense. Yeah, Aman has to say something.
Yeah, I have a question, like to add on what Evan said, like having cross-platform styles for web and iOS apps or Android apps. So how do you handle like the transformation of styles? Like some things like on mobile applications might not work for web.
Yeah, like I find a lot of like pan gestures, like horizontal pan gestures, do not work well on web because they use that like kind of built in and things like that. Especially like taps at the bottom of the screen tend to like bring the tab bar up, and built-in things like a lot of that tends to fall for me personally under React Navigation's umbrella. And React Navigation usually has a lot of kind of like built-in hatches for fixing things like that. Like by default, the drawer gesture will like not be enabled unless you like go in and manually enable it. I don't know if you have more to that, Satya, but usually I find that things like these larger bucket modules like React Navigation handle it for me.
Awesome. And also to add to what Aman said, I think Aman touched upon theming a bit, and also like how Shopify's Reanimated solves a bigger problem that everything is like highly customizable. So I'm going to drop in the Tailwind bomb here. So do you think something like Tailwind makes sense with React Native?
Are you asserting that we think Tailwind makes sense with React?
Not React, but React Native to be specific.
I think that like I have used Tailwind a bit just to play around. The thing with Tailwind that I found is that you have to write a lot of styles, basically CSS, and that's what you are going to do if you're writing React Native applications without using any component library. The problem with design systems that I've found in working is that it's not about how you're writing styles, it's about how you're maintaining them across the application. And like if you're not maintaining it in a proper way, like the reason I mentioned Shopify's restyle is that it encapsulate your code, like the basic things like typography and themes. Like you can create multiple themes. You can go beyond light and dark themes. So that is the reason I feel like Tailwind, like if it's like a custom wrapper around it that works in the way that React Native handles styles, could be better. But I don't know. Like we will have to see what's in the future.
Satya, I think it's also your topic, CSS and JS, and a bit of design system. Go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't really used Tailwind much. Never been attracted to this concept of writing a lot of inline classes. I more prefer like having components to share your like things, instead of writing a lot of inline styles, because then you have a maintenance issue, because then you don't want to repeat it everywhere. And yeah, so I kind of think like, sure, if you can have a Tailwind API in React Native, why not? But I think the main way to reuse things in React Native should be components. and you can use Tailwind inside these components, or you can use React Native API in these components. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah, in the end, like you use components everywhere. That's my opinion.
Makes sense, Satya. I think that's a bit controversial, I would say. So I would love to hear from Evan from on this topic.
I mean, components are great. Tree shaking and fast refresh and things like these all work because of components. And yeah, I personally think Restyle is also really good, and some of and like Style Sheet in React Native Web is also really fast. I personally haven't really gotten very into Tailwind and just my personal usage whenever I'm making apps. I did like that the one meme by like Jamie from Discord, like with just 60 classes, you can with just merely 60 classes, you can make a couple of buttons. I was like, it is very verbose, but it seems like the progress is like coming along, and I imagine that it'll become pretty good in the future.
Right.
Another,
Yeah.
so sorry to interrupt. Like another thing Satya touched is that writing inline styles. Like if you're writing inline styles in React Native, you won't have that like bug fixing and tracing of styles. Like if something goes wrong or something is not working, where it's coming from. So I think it's more important to have component-based styles.
Makes sense. I'm not sure if you guys have like checked it out. There is something called as styled system, which brings all those Tailwind philosophy to React components, and you can pass things like say p is equal to 1, and then it picks it from the theme. And so a bunch of Tailwind like CSS classes, but instead of classes, we've got props, and then you can build your own design system on top of it. But anyway, that was me setting ground for my talk at 3:30. Anyway, let's move on. I think uh, I would like to touch, since we're talking about design system, I would like to talk about accessibility a bit. I think Evan spoke how we need to split out .web.js for accessibility on the web, and then iOS and Android handles it differently. So let's start with maybe Evan on this topic. How do you make your apps accessible, React Native apps specifically? Yeah.
Well, React Native Web is actually really nice because I think some of its like highlight features are the super fast CSS and JS, and just like the universal components and accessibility. It's like one of their flagship features, and the accessibility is really nice inside of it, and it's very clever too. I think from like a universal design standpoint, the way that things like headers work, where you have a text and then you say like accessibility level header, and then that will make it actually render in H1 is really nice. And also things like images, where it will render like a div, and then it will use like it'll use like a CSS property to render the image, but then we'll also render like an image tag so that it's accessible. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes in React Native Web, almost like very aggressively, to make sure that your app is always very accessible, even if you are kind of like accidentally doing it, you're making your app very accessible. And I also like the way that it makes accessibility into more of like a building block as opposed to an add-on, where you don't have to go back later and like have this pass at accessibility. It's just like accessibility is a way that you like use React to build your app. And I think that's really clever. And I personally find it just like really thoughtful and nice to use.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like Evan said, what is also cool, if you have a text component and you pass accessibility role as link and you pass href, it renders like an anchor tag behind the scenes, which is pretty great, because then you get the browser behavior and you didn't have to write any platform specific code. So yeah, that's really awesome.
And how about Android and iOS? Like we're talking more of React Native Web, but let's stick to React Native itself.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, the new accessibility APIs have changed a lot, because if I remember a while ago, the APIs for accessibility on Android and iOS were widely different. Some things worked on iOS, some things worked on Android. So you had to write a lot of like platform specific accessibility code. But recently these APIs have been unified. Now you have a unified set of APIs, and you can use a lot of them to like provide proper accessibility for React Native apps. I mean, there are still a lot of things missing, uh, like uh, unless you sometimes you have to use native components to get like proper accessibility, because there are not any props available for that. For example, uh, I mean, there was a recent. I don't have any recent examples in mind, but for example, there was APIs missing for building tabs, and it was recently added, like in past two React Native releases, I think. Yeah, so you could not really build a like a tab UI without using native code if you want it to be accessible. So I think a lot has improved, but a lot are still missing. For example, if you have a view in absolute position, it messes up the accessibility. The screen reader doesn't read it, so it's, yeah, a lot is still missing in my
Yeah.
opinion.
This isn't necessarily new, but wasn't there like that issue where if there was like React Native screens, I think fixed this in React Navigation, where if you like were pushing a bunch of views on top of each other in like navigators, then the accessibility reader would like see all the views behind all of the screens, and then React Native screens kind of helped you to like dismount those views so that the
Yeah,
I don't know.
actually, that's not really a problem, even if you don't use React Native screens, because we set in React Native, we set the proper accessibility roles to like hide a tree from the accessibility tree.
Oh, it's pretty
But,
cool.
but it's still problematic in some cases. For example, for people who are using Android TV, that doesn't work. So yeah, they have to use React Native screens, and it fixes it for them. But yeah, what we do works in most cases, but in some cases it doesn't work. So yeah, it's not like very consistent across platforms. And also these props don't work on the web. So we had to have like custom code on the web by default to handle these things for React navigation.
Right. Something I would like to see more in accessibility in React Native, just like in the ecosystem more, is more like tooling around Xcode's built-in developer tools for helping you to debug your accessibility. I don't really see people use that much. Like the accessibility inspector, which you can access through Xcode, which will like open up like a little, I don't know, like breakdown and show you how like accessible your app is. And I think Android Studio also has something like the accessibility scanner, if I remember that correctly, which does something similar. I don't see too many people like using that or just like tooling around that at all. Or it would be nice if that was like a little bit more integrated into our like developer tooling, maybe like a Flipper plugin
Yeah.
or something, which showed you like the accessibility breakdown and showed you like which points on your screen were accessible. Because I know that like if you're just doing native development, you do have access to these tools. And so I think it's just a matter of like integrating that a little bit like closer to what we have currently when we're developing React Native apps.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. We need a cross-platform tool, which would be very useful. But in terms of these tools, like Xcode has this accessibility inspector. It's really useful. I have used it a lot of times. But what I was missing from Xcode is on Android, you can use TalkBack on the emulator, so you can like have proper accessibility. But on iOS emulator, you cannot do that. There is no built-in voiceover for the emulator, so you need a device to actually test it, which is not great experience. So yeah, that was the big problem I had, because I would see something in accessibility inspector and I would think that it would work, but it doesn't actually work, because yeah, I need to test to like on the device to know that it works.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh man,
Interesting.
that's
Yeah.
not great.
Okay. I think Aman was trying to say something. Aman, sorry, you're on
You're
mute.
muted.
Yeah, sorry. Like I was just adding to Satya's point. Like you have to test it on a real device to test out the accessibility features of your app. So yeah.
Interesting. So I think accessibility, we forget that we just do it for props and make sure that it can be read by a screen reader, or it has like tab index and all those things. But we also have few more things like making sure that the contrast color is fine, contrast ratio, and a few other things as well. But anyway, I think we've got like last 4 to 5 minutes, and the last topic that I want to touch is no code. Since Aman is here, Aman is working with DraftBit, and we see that we have few things happening in the React Native ecosystem with no code. Aman, over to you.
Yeah, so GraphBit is a building tool for your React Native apps, and you can use your web browser like Firefox or Chrome to build it, and you get your exportable code, and it gets exported in Expo. And you have things like we have some features coming up for like custom code and Firebase integration. So using custom code, like you can use pretty much any React Native or Expo API, like which is not currently available in the with the building tool, because the building tool is more concentrated on designing part, and the Firebase integration is going to open things like authentication and saving data to Firestore. And like Dapper also has support for REST API. So currently you can consume any REST API to see how your app is gonna represent the data. That's the DraftBit in a nutshell.
Yeah, I want to like no code makes a lot of sense, but I want to ask this question maybe to Satya and Evan more. Like, what's the immediate reaction of the developers when they are given a no code tool, and how is the adoption like? Do you think that's still in the future, or like are we doing no code today? Like Figma has some plugins, and then we have something on the XD side as well. So what, Evan, maybe you can take this up.
Yeah, I think that no code opens the door for a lot of new developers, and a lot of developers who might not have been attracted to like what React Native was offering originally. And I think it's just like an abstraction that makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. Like I know a lot of people in just the web no code world who it's just like a massive, massive industry. And opening that up to React Native just kind of shows that like the React Native industry is like going in lots of different directions, and it's still very like active and alive. And I think it just means that it's going to be like an influx of lots of new different types of developers who may have found like code a little bit too daunting at first. And even if they are just into no code, they'll probably like some of them will venture into just actually developing with like writing code themselves, or getting like more into depth in maybe the native side. So I think it's really exciting, and I'm super excited to see what DraftBit's doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's kind of disappointing that these no-code tools are not that popular. I don't see a lot of developers using them. I hope they would be more popular, because it's really cool that you don't have to write code for everything. I don't want to write code for like every single thing, you know. Some things are complex and you have to write code for them, but a lot of things we just have like list of things with a title, with a description, with an image. Like, why not? So yeah, I'm really hopeful about these no-code tools, and I hope they become popular in future.
All right.
I also
Okay. Yeah, I think we're
I
running
ju-
out of time. Aman, sorry to interrupt you. I think I'll have to cut this short. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining in. And to all three of you, Aman, Satya, and Evan, it was really nice having you in the panel. And I loved talking and touching the topics and getting your thoughts onto this. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, thanks. Bye bye.
Yeah, thanks.